I'm conscious of the fact that if I were listening to this episode at a certain time, I would be probably having some light bulb moments and almost assuming that that was the key to me losing weight.
Yes.
And actually, I think that all of this insight, if it does provide you with some, I would not expect anything to change from a behavior point of view. The value of this awareness is not to lose weight. I think that just to not look at this as necessarily like an action point, but just as a piece of understanding yourself more, potentially.
Hello and welcome to the Life After Diets podcast. I'm Sarah Dosanjh, psychotherapist and author of the book, I Can't Stop Eating.
And I'm Stefanie Michele, binge recovery health coach. If you feel out of control around food, we get it because we've been there.
Thank you for joining our conversations about how to make peace with food and feel more comfortable in our bodies.
Now on to this week's episode. This is a sensitive episode. I'm a little nervous to talk about it.
Yeah, I am too, which is probably why it's taken us as long as it has to get round to recording an episode on this, because this was one of our episode ideas when we first started the podcast. It was on our initial ideas list.
We still have that list.
That's where I saw it.
It's still sitting there. Yeah.
Yeah, I looked at that list and I saw it when we were looking for a topic for that. And I was like, okay, let's do it. Let's tackle this topic. So nearly 3 years ago now, I put on a video on Instagram, just a 90-second video. And it was titled, What If I'm Holding On to Weight in Order to Be Invisible? And this topic is not going to resonate with everybody, but there are a number of people who resonate with this idea that holding on, I didn't even see, even the language for me just feels completely wrong about that, because it sort of pathologizes weight in this way, which is why this is such a difficult topic to talk about.
I'd like to name that. This episode is not suggesting that having weight on your body is a pathology.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. There are a section of people for whom their struggles with their body image, their sense of their body and their relationship with food was changed after a trauma or event. So this is really hard to talk about.
Like every sentence you have to question.
Oh my goodness, I was not expecting it to be this difficult. Sometimes sexual trauma. No, I didn't even want to say that. I mean, that was sometimes sexual trauma. It sounded really wanky. Oh my. Okay, you try.
Because I have a story I can talk from my own experience with. Because this was posited to me when I was in college from my therapist that I've named here before, a therapist I absolutely loved and really connected with and worked with for many years.
Guy.
Yes, his name is Guy. If you've listened to the episode with my mom, I wonder if Guy ever listens to my episodes. Hi, if you do. So in those years in college, right? This was when my binge eating had just started, and I gained so much weight quickly. I'm in my freshman year of college, and that weight stayed on my body, and I kept increasingly gaining weight to what I believe now was over my weight set point. Now, I was coming from a place where I was absolutely under my weight set point or weight set range. And so, but I bypassed it. And then I just binged and binged and binged. There was no active restriction, physical restriction happening during these years. I talk a lot about restriction in my history of an eating disorder, but that was later. It was at different points. At this point, I was only binge eating, and I was binge eating every single day. A lot. And so as a result, my body was growing and growing. And so I remember this particular therapy session, and we were talking about the power dynamic in my family and my relationship with power. And it was coming up that I was afraid of it, that I was afraid of being, of having a voice. I was afraid of being confrontational. I was afraid of being seen because of some kind of absorbed threat of the way that I related to my dad and his relationship with power and this whole thing. This was the conversation. And Guy suggested to me, he said, do you think that, I don't remember the way he put it. I don't know if it was a question or a statement or what, but something like, do you think that you are hiding. Like, are you afraid of your power? Because when I had been talking about my, my experience with restriction in high school, there had been this huge amount of getting seen, right? So when I lost this weight in high school and I got a lot of attention, I'm using the word power as an umbrella for these things, for like attention and validation. But it did. There was this power element to it. I felt powerful during that time. And so the connection became, is this binge behavior and the subsequent weight gain an effort to keep that power away, like to sort of a reflection of your own discomfort with power, which I vehemently disagreed with at the time, because I was like, no, this is just because like I want the power actually. But I think that now when I look back, absolutely, I was terrified of being seen anymore. I wanted to hide. I think that was a time in my life where I was so absolutely overwhelmed and had no idea what was going on with me, and I'd had a series of lowercase t traumas that had happened in the years before that I had not processed at all. And I think I was in a freeze state, and I just wanted to hide. And I was also just newly in college, and I was like, I don't want to be here. I am so terrified, right? Like terror. I talk about terror all the time. Like, that's the state I was in, and I was still functioning. And I was like, I need to get out. I need to get out. And I think that being seen was the last thing that I wanted. And so I think that there was validity to this. And it's very difficult to talk about it without pathologizing it. But there was a hiding that was happening, and that hiding was easier to do the more that I gained weight, because the more that I gained weight, the more I knew I would hide. It wasn't necessarily the weight itself. It was more about the fact that I would use my weight as a reason to stay in my dorm, to not go to bars, to not go to parties, to withdraw, to not get dressed, like it was my excuse for hiding. And so in that way, it served that purpose, right? And I could also live in that body right now and absolutely not hide and be seen and have power, quote unquote, to be, I could do that. It's not a product of the body itself. It's about the way that we treat our body when it's a certain size, and the way that we assume that our culture, and not assume, but sometimes that our culture does treat us as more invisible because of our size. But it's not just the body weight itself. It's what it represents to us.
I know when I gained weight, the sexual advances, comments, even like touching that would happen sometimes in public places, like all of that stopped. And it was quite nice to be free of that. Of course, there's another part of the brain going, like, making all the judgments about now that what that means about being less sexually desirable. But there was a safety in that as well. Oh, yeah. You've just drawn a memory for me, actually, that I'd forgotten about. When I was 16. There's some stuff going on there. We went on a family vacation, and at the hotel, like, I had brought my lacrosse stick, because in my school we couldn't, unless we played every day, we couldn't play in the game anyway. So I had my lacrosse stick, and I had gone to the side of the hotel to practice, like throwing and catching. And I went over there, and I don't know if my sister was with me or not. I think she might have been, because I don't think my parents would have let me go off by myself. But I remember playing in this area, and I remember this man who worked at the hotel came over, and he got very close to me. And I think that he touched my arm or something, or my back. And he said, "You're beautiful." This whole thing. And he invited me somewhere, or asked me to meet him later that night or something like that. And I don't really remember what he said. I just remember this invitation and this like closeness that is not what I was there for. Like, and plus it was so unsolicited and so unwelcome. But I remember feeling that vulnerability. I was 16 years old, and I was also like a late bloomer in general. And I wasn't ready for all of that. I remember even the context of this, like I remember my friends all at this time had gotten boyfriends, and they were dating. And I remember not being ready for all that. I don't think I appreciated how much that scared me. But even that, you know what I mean? Where like it alerts you to how much you're being seen without your awareness, and how people will be willing to approach you and to touch you and to invite you places and at the time, I think that I did have an association of that with my body,
because that was also simultaneously the time that I had lost some weight and was getting more and more of that kind of attention. So there was this connection. And I think sometimes when clients I've worked with who've had sexual trauma around the time of puberty and, during these adolescent years when your body's changing, there is this correlation we're making, even if it's not conscious, of like, my body is inviting new attention that I am not, that's scaring me. And that, again, in a prior episode that I talked about, the way that our brain will imprint trauma, or the nervous system will imprint a trauma, even outside of a conscious awareness, where it's coded. And when experiences like this happen, there's something in the nervous system that's saying, oh, danger, there's an alert here. Take in all the information you have, like what could be causing this? What are the risks? Da, da, da. And I think somewhere we can encode, like, my body is creating this problem, or it's part of this problem. And so even if that's not a conscious thing, that can be carried and carried and carried and carried. And honestly, I think I carry that still, like, where there is some kind of association. Yeah, I'm going to abruptly end again because I just feel like I'm not really sure. Like, that just all came up.
I've got so many memories coming up as I'm listening to you. Like, my brain is literally just pinging off with all these. I can remember so many times, like, being on the tube and there'd be a guy on the tube who would just stare.
Yeah.
Like, unapologetically, like that really fixed, intense gaze, which is so, I used to hate it. It was so uncomfortable being like scrutinized in that way. Another memory that came into my head was actually, I think I would have been maybe 20. I just joined the police, and there was a guy on my team who was married, who was probably at least 12, 13 years older than me, maybe older than that. I don't know. And he was known as a bit of a Lothario. Like, he was always, we would put over the side with someone or other. And I remember at one point I was in the custody suite and I was in the jailer's office, and he blocked the door and was trying to get me to agree to go out with him. And he wouldn't let me leave the office. And I'm like, I'm in a police station here, like in a custody suite. And I remember that fear that kind of hit me, even though of like this building that was in, there was something that felt so threatening about it. And the other thing that came in, because we're thinking about the idea of losing weight and what comes with that in terms of a shift in attention. I remember in my eating disorder, at a time when I was restricting and bulimic, I was losing some weight, and I came into the office, and I was cycling in at that time, and I came in like my leggings and my bike gear, and I was putting my bike away, and one of the guys from the office, who I would say was he was not a macho guy, like he was a really, I don't want to say soft in any kind of derogatory way, but like this sort of soft, friendly, really likable guy. And he was like, my goodness, Sarah, he's like, you look amazing. And I was like, thanks. And he's like, it's kind of making me feel a bit weird. And he left. And I remember just being like, what? Something has like almost shifted in this dynamic here. Suddenly I've become an object of, as I saw it, as I interpreted it, of sexual attention from this guy who hadn't looked at me in that way. Otherwise it wouldn't be weird to him, right? To suddenly, like, almost like suddenly fancying your sister or something like weird like that. It just feels wrong. That was what I experienced. And I remember at the time feeling a mix of enjoying that. I'll be honest. There was a part of me that enjoyed it, and a part of me that was like, oh crap, something shifted here.
Yeah. I think the parts thing is really important as a concept, because many people might say like, no, I want the attention. I want the power. I want to be approached. I want to be desired. And that could be true. But I think what we're talking about is the part of us that is less acknowledged, that is scared, or that is not comfortable with that, because we don't have control over that, all the time. And especially in moments where we're taken aback in these ways, where it's like not been something we've been expecting or asking for, there's a part that gets, and we have to remember the way our systems are designed to protect first, not to be in charge. Like, before anything, like we're built to protect ourselves. And so where there is some sense of like there's a threat here or discomfort here, the body will name that and like take it, you know what I mean? And just be like, oh, we're going to save this somewhere. And that part, I think, typically we're not acknowledging that a lot of the time, because our conscious minds, our more evolved brains will be like, no, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with attention. I know how to defend myself. I know I don't feel under threat. So it's easily minimized, right? But it's this piece. It's like, I'm gonna hold on to that though, because there is some kind of feeling I'm getting from this, and I need to remember this feeling so that I can protect myself from it. That I think that could very potentially be going on for many people, where there's experiences. And even I'm wondering for listeners, as you're listening to Sarah and I talk about memories, like what might even be coming up for you, because I'm having more and more as I'm sitting here, and they're all from that time bracket of being younger. Like they're from this time where my body really was changing, and I'm remembering things that were like, yeah, these very subtle ways of understanding that my body was changing, and that somebody was picking up on that in a way that wasn't just an observation. It was like there was something more to it, and I couldn't even name it if I tried. It's just, you just know the feeling of being seen in this different way that feels like a ooh. And how many of those instances might be part of how our bodies are responding today.
Well, the psychoanalytic lens, when you're looking at, oh, is there something else going on around weight loss, will say things like they can pathologize weight and say, like, you are holding on to your weight because you're scared that if you lose weight, this is what might be going on. And I guess what we're trying to do is have a conversation about what some of those fears can be, at the same time as saying, we're not saying that weight loss is good, or that you should be trying to lose weight, or that it's somehow wrong to feel safer having more weight on you. And so when I'm thinking about all the ways in which the idea of losing weight, or even starting to lose weight, triggers something sort of quite deep and subconscious from the psychological and emotional level. Because first of all, like, you've got the physical triggers of losing weight that can be part of it for people, and the body might rebel against that from a biological perspective. So we also don't want to pathologize or talk about it through the psychological lens, something that can also be very physical, which feels really important to emphasize in this conversation. But one story that I hear quite a bit, and I've heard this from several people, I'd be interested if you've ever heard this, Steph, is someone's story whereby when they were younger, for whatever reason, their parents or caregivers were concerned about their weight. And so this emphasis was on fixing their weight. Their weight was a problem. And so there was parental control around what they were eating and all of that kind of thing. And that the parents always wanted them to be smaller, either for, like, I say good reasons, but reasons because they believed that that was better for them, or for any other kind of reasons, the reason not being important. And it lends them to this place where there's this little rebel inside them that kind of goes, yeah, but if you lost weight now and you became the size that would have been acceptable to everyone else, that somehow they win and you lose. Because it was, you have to become this, and we're going to take away your freedom to do that. We're going to take away your freedom. You become this. Good. You're a good person now. We accept you. We approve of you, which feels like to a kid, we love you, right? But the rebellion is like, oh, I just want to be loved as I am. I want to be acceptable as I am. So the idea of losing weight triggers something in that. Do you know what I'm saying? Do you come across this?
This is to me, that's like in that case, we're not necessarily talking about invisibility, but of like acquiescence and of unconditional love, like that the part of us that is saying no to that condition is speaking up there. So it's not necessarily the invisibility theme, but more of this idea that there are these subconscious parts that are, or sometimes conscious. Yes, I agree with that. And yes, I've seen that. I also I've had a client once who really identified with being nice, and she really likened her niceness to her body size because she was the non-threatening friend, right? So like this was what she stated. She said that she felt like girls liked her in school and women liked her, her colleagues liked her because she was not seen as a threat to them, and there wasn't this sense of competition. And while that made her sad and also made her angry, it also made her feel like when she thought about losing weight, she was like, I don't want to, if I'm not that person, then like what's going to happen? Like that's a safety net for me. That's how I identify. And that's how I feel like my relationships have been built. And that may or may not be true, but when we feel like that is something that's part of the foundation of our connection to someone, or if like we are seen as inherently non-threatening because we're not competing for attention from the male gaze, then if my body changes, does my entire identity change, or does the way people see me change to the extent that we are now connecting differently and I'm not as protected?
Well, because losing weight, it invokes reactions in other people, right? I remember at that time I talked about before, because it's the only time in my life where I've lost a significant amount of weight. And I remember my friend, really close, one of my best friends, been friends for 20 years, when she saw me and she hadn't seen me for a month or so, she said, "You've lost weight." Exactly like that. Just this statement, very sharp, very just, I remember hearing like, gosh, that sounds like an accusation.
Yeah.
You know, in the way that it was said. And so I don't know what that might have brought up for her, seeing that. And I've been on the other side of it as well. Like I worked with somebody and we both kind of bonded over struggling with food, basically talking about dieting and struggling to diet. I didn't really go into depth with her about how bad it had got with my binge eating and stuff. But we connected over that thing. And she left and went and worked somewhere else. And maybe a few months later, we agreed to meet up again. And we turned out, and she had lost a significant amount of weight. And me and her, we had always been trying to do this thing together. And I remember seeing this change in her. And I was like, oh my good. And I was the person who did the over the top reaction, right? And I remember her reaction was so weird. I'm like, why are you not more excited about it? You're thin. We talked about wanting this way more than was probably healthy for us. And now you've got it. And I couldn't understand her reaction, why she wasn't more excited. And she'd done a pretty extreme diet, you know, meal replacements, that kind of thing as well. So there was probably a whole load of other things going on that I would have been completely ignorant to at that point in my life. But I remember feeling that. I remember feeling that discomfort about other people losing weight. So being very conscious that for someone, knowing that if you lose weight, your body changes, is going to cause discomfort in someone else. If you would like to come and connect with us in person, we're going to be in Dublin on Saturday, the 16th of September, 2023. We're going to be teaming up with the Intuitive Eating Hub for a workshop, followed by a social at a local Irish pub. We would love to meet you and hope you can join us.
And don't forget, you can still join our community of listeners by signing up on Patreon for access to monthly support calls, an active private Facebook group, and regular Ask Us Anything bonus calls. Links for Dublin and for the community are in the show notes.
So I even had this thought the other day, Steph. I'll share this with you on the podcast. Why not? I could have told you privately, but so I've signed up to do my yoga teacher training in India, and it's going to be a month-long thing. So I did think, what if my body changes? And like having to hold that. And when I'm away for a month, I'm not going to be in charge of my food.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a vegetarian diet, and chances are, you know, and I think I'll be fine with that. But I thought, well, what if my body were to change? And then I thought, how would that impact Steph as well? I thought, if Steph saw me and then my body was smaller, I thought, I wonder if she would have a reaction or a feeling about that. And then I would think, well, she wouldn't be allowed to say anything, right? Because of, you know, the work. It's not like you wouldn't bring it up, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Because that's just not what we do.
No, I would wait for you to bring it up.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like I would probably have a reaction, but I trust myself with that. Like I feel like I know how to get myself, again, the same way we talk about body image in general. Like there might be a reaction, and then there would be a, what do I do with this? How do I know how to handle this? Let me do what I do. Yeah, but sure. I mean, like because body sizes they're just too focused on to not. I mean, we do notice these things the same way I would also notice if you came back with blonde hair. You know what I mean? Like I would just notice these things. But I think, yeah,
you would comment on my hair.
I know.
You would say, "Oh my goodness, you changed your hair."
Of
with
course,
the weight, you wouldn't.
No, I wouldn't, because I know what that does to a person. Yeah. Right. So I would not do that to you.
Yeah.
You know, and I wouldn't do it to myself either. You know what I mean? And that's, yeah, I mean, that's okay. I think it's, well, now we'll talk about it.
Yeah. Like, you know,
you
it's
come back
fear.
and we'll name
because it's also, I think, highly likely that my body won't change much, but it crossed my mind.
Yeah.
Because I'm doing something different with my movement. So there's a lot, I think, going on around me and body image. And when I saw pictures of like people at this yoga retreat, well, not retreat, the training, I saw a few class photos and everyone was thin. And I was like, if this is the representation, I am going to be the biggest body in the room. At the yoga classes I've been to here in Queens, with like 18 people each time. My body's been the biggest in the room.
Yeah.
So there's so much, and I'm just noticing it. I don't feel sucked into it yet, but I'm like, oh, like there's stuff going on around
Absolutely.
here. Yeah.
One of my clients worked with me on body image during, I think, our first session. She was home, and then after that she went to India. I think no, she went to a different, and she did a yoga training, and that is exactly what we worked through the entire time, was that, you know, this exact piece. It's not easy, especially when you're like immersed in it in this way. See, this is one of those times where I'm about to say something that you say, and we were just recently talking about the things we've picked up. I was about to say, I'm conscious of the fact that if I were listening to this episode at a certain time, I would be probably having like, oh yes, like some light bulb moments, and almost assuming that that was the key to me losing weight.
Yes.
And actually, I think that all of this insight, if it does provide you with some, I would not expect anything to change from a behavior point of view. And I really want to say that because I've had the most mind-blowing breakthroughs, but that's as far as it went. It didn't actually change anything, and it didn't actually affect behaviors, even though it felt like it should, but it didn't. The thing is, the value of this awareness is not to lose weight. The inherent value of being aware of something that may be going on for whatever that's worth. You know what I mean? And what that's worth to you. I guess maybe for me, like self-awareness is a value of mine. So to me, it does have an inherent value. But I think that just to not look at this as necessarily like an action point, but just as a piece of understanding yourself more, potentially.
That is so important. I'm going to cut and paste that and put it in the intro somewhere, because that needs to be, people need to be primed with that, I think, when they listen to the rest of it. Because that how you phrased it there. Yes, exactly that. Which is one of the things, like some of the uneasiness that's around it that I couldn't quite bring together into words. Yeah. Yeah. I want to comment on the natural conflict, I think, in the desire to be seen and to not be seen. So it feels like if you are in a body that fits society's ideals and you get more seen because of that, more attention in whatever way that might look, there can be a desire sometimes to be like, I just don't want to be seen. And on the flip side of it, that you may be in a body where you do feel more invisible. You know, I think for me, also becoming of a certain age, I'm feeling less visible in that sort of attention way on my body, that sometimes the desire to be seen is there and not available. And so I don't know, sometimes it feels like we can't win, right? What is, Steph, if you could just tell us, what is the perfect balance between being seen and not being seen?
I did a post on this.
Oh, okay, great. You got the answer. I'm just going to make myself
cannot remember what it said. I'm like, oh, can I look up my post?
I'm sure it was very good.
It was like 6 months ago. I think like the conflict in it is that you can't control, like there's times where we want very much to be seen and it would do us good, you know, like it feels supportive to be seen. And there's times where it feels supportive not to be, and you can't vacillate. You don't have control over that. And I think that's there's the rub. Like it's dangerous sometimes even to be seen. And then it's dangerous to not be seen in different situations. Right. So how do we, it's just not a black and white issue. I am going to look up the post. We'll find out what my words of wisdom were at one time. It's so much harder to do live. Do you know that like when I actually write a post, I have no idea what I'm going to say as I sit down to write. It just comes out my fingers.
Oh, I love that. You're just so inspired.
It feels like when I write, like I'll be like, I don't know what I think. And then I start typing. I'm like, oh yeah, that's what I think. I have to have like my hands on a keyboard sometimes to access it, which is interesting considering I do podcasts. If I was writing about our topics, you might get a different content. I found it. It came out, let's see, it's from November 2022. So the title was, Why Do I Crave Attention and Feel Uncomfortable with It at the Same Time? This post speaks to the feeling some of us experience when we simultaneously desire validation and want to remain hidden. This can show up as body image issues, the pursuit of a body that invites admiration, but also leaves us feeling exposed. So then I've got the thread of like the different topics. So the heading on the first one is attention stands in for similar but not equivalent needs. So attention being conflated with belonging, acceptance, and validation. Like attention being different than belonging, but we're assuming that they're the same thing. But attention driven by appearance brings up feelings of conditional worth. So it feels good for a second, maybe longer. And then we start to feel like that validation is conditional. We feel less validated as the person. After a while, the attention starts to feel lonely and empty. It's not enough. And despite the rush of the initial applause, we start to sense this. We want to be seen, but not exposed. If we've spent long enough feeling unseen by people that matter to us, we learn to build a cocoon for ourselves to protect us from that pain. Suddenly being seen is uncomfortable. It feels like exposure and it no longer feels safe. This also applies if our boundaries have been violated. The need for validation is still present, but the threat of being violated again is too risky. Being seen becomes a double-edged sword, and control over that becomes paramount. There's a conflict in values. We're trained to seek out the approval from those who we perceive to hold the most power, like the extroverts, the authority figures, the popular kids, and oftentimes men. But power is not safety. And accumulating approval from those we don't necessarily relate to, like, or feel safe with can create the sense of internal conflict rooted in fear instead of authenticity.
You owe it to the world to write a book. You really do. It's not even about you anymore. Especially as you describe, like you just put your fingers on the keyboard and it comes out.
Yeah.
I think it's important that you do. Anyway.
Okay. Thanks, Sarah.
That's okay.
That validation, I feel so seen. And at the same time, feel so called out and exposed. Just kidding. I don't.
Yeah. That's so true, right? It's a conflict. So what do we do about that?
Oh, well, the last slide of the post said, what do we do about that?
Okay.
Honest to goodness.
As you would.
I just put it away. So what can we do?
Great. Go for it.
Identify the authentic needs, like belonging, safety, connection. Identify the attachment to any singular way of addressing those needs and develop a wider landscape of meeting them. So,
I was going to say,
go ahead.
To pause on that. That idea that controlling my body, getting my body to be or look a certain way, that's the vehicle to getting that. That is the only path. That's the belief that's going to keep you stuck. That's what we're trying to question with our podcast and all the other amazing people that talk about this stuff as well. Yeah.
Right. Because I think we really can think that is the only way we get it, because it is quite a powerful way that we do get it. Yeah. But it isn't the only access that we have. And yeah, that being important.
It also only brings the conditional earth. When the first part of that is about like identifying the authentic need, does it really bring you the authentic need?
Right. So, yeah. Exactly. And also it's like it sounds so simple to identify the needs and identify a wider landscape. And that takes that's really hard to do, actually. So that's not something you just sit down and write a list necessarily. It could be, but I think that's an exploration. Mm-hmm. Explore fears around meeting those needs, which is sort of what we're speaking to here. Clarify your value systems, which you can do if you attend one of our workshops or not. We didn't even get to last time. Focus on themes of control, autonomy, empowerment, values, and safety, both related to and unrelated to the body, potentially with someone who is trained to support you.
Mm-hmm. Go back to the one before values.
The one before, explore fears around meeting your needs.
Yes. So when we're talking about needs, what are we talking about? We're talking about acceptance, belonging, connection, love, safety. Mm-hmm. Anything else? Kind of any of the big ones that have come up? Autonomy, that kind of thing. Right. So the fears, let's say the fear of connection, real connection, and the unconditional acceptance, for me, that requires vulnerability. That's how we connect. So then there's the fear around that. And I just wanted to pause on this because some people might hear that and go, well, I don't know what I'm afraid of. Why would I be afraid of autonomy? Why would I be afraid of connection? Because sometimes the roots to that involve us to take some risks, right? Because we don't always know if we're going to get our need met in the place that we look for it. So it also means that we're open to being hurt and disappointed, right?
You know what else comes up a lot is if you aren't invisible and you connect, there's this almost feeling like, well, in those times, it like you lose the ability to hide when you need to, right? Like it almost feels like it takes away the sense of being able to get out if you need it. So if it's easier maybe to stay here, because if we go out there, we connect and we find that we're overwhelmed or we're disappointed or whatever it might be, that then we're like in this exposed state and we no longer can run back to our little cocoon of like hiding, which isn't true because I do it all the time.
Mummy's locking herself in the closet for a bit. Leave me
Yeah,
alone.
absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's because I don't need the excuse anymore. Like, I don't need to use food as the excuse to do that. I say, like, I am feeling overwhelmed by people, or I am feeling rejected. And so I need some time alone. I need to come back. I need to hide for a little while.
Yeah. I can relate to the idea of needing to sometimes withdraw and not be seen, not feel exposed.
Yeah.
So we're talking about this idea. Am I trying to be invisible? Am I holding on to weight to be invisible? Maybe invisible isn't the most helpful word. Maybe it's like in order to be safe. Yeah, be safe. Be able to, because we've got these inner worlds, right? We have a whole inner world. There's a whole universe inside us of our experiences. And then we've got the outer world. And the way I see it, sometimes I need to like go into my inner world. And if the outer world is trying to pull me out of it all the time, demand this or tell me I'm this and tell me I'm that, it's much harder for me to access and be able to put my inner world into a little bit of order or just out of chaos.
Yeah. Yeah, that doesn't disappear. You do not have to give up the ability to cocoon or to hide or to withdraw just because you don't have an eating disorder.
But I guess trying to play that out through body size, recognizing that there are other ways that you can consciously give that to yourself, which kind of involves going like, I'm allowed to do this.
Yes.
Because especially with the world lifting up the extrovert as being the ideal.
Yes.
The desire to withdraw is like, no, I'm supposed to be out meeting people all the time and having fun and living my best life and traveling and doing, and then putting it on social media so that everyone else knows that I'm doing.
Yes.
So there's a permission part in this. It's like when you don't give yourself permission, like the body can become a way to like using your body in order to do that, which is what you were talking about right at the beginning. Right. I can say, because my body's like this, I'm allowed to withdraw because I've decided that I'm not acceptable because my body's like this. Yeah. And
then you feel okay about it. You feel like you deserve that. Whereas I don't think the world makes us feel like that's permissible. I even still feel like that. There's times where I'm like, I don't want to do anything this weekend. Like, is that weird? You know what I mean? Like, is that like, I can't tell anyone. You know what I mean? It's this weird. I have to remind myself I have permission to do that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm glad that you're not invisible.
Thank you, Sarah. Likewise.
Doing a podcast like this involves making ourselves visible. And I've definitely experienced this. I'm sure you have as well. Like coming off podcasts sometimes and having that feeling of overexposure a bit.
That's why I don't listen to them all the time. Sometimes I do, and I'm like, oh, it was all right. But if I listen to it, I'm like, oh, turn this off. It doesn't exist in my mind.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
All right. Well, this is our last recording together in New York. Last time we're going to be doing it on the same time zone.
You'll be almost to India by the time this comes out.
Yeah, I will actually.
Yeah.
Alrighty then.
This is your last morning, Sarah.
I know. Yeah, so enjoy it while it lasts. I'm going to be back to
Let's see if we tell the difference.
Yeah, my afternoon slump from next week onwards.
All right.
See you next time.